And today's topic of the discussion is a pretty vague one. It's sort of youth and politics, and it is a match. It's sort of ironic because during this discussion we will look how to probably improve this equation, right? We will have some discussion. We'll have some, let's say, suggestions on how to improve improve how young people participate in politics. And here today with me, I have an EU youth delegate of Finland and a political commentator of the most popular Finnish TV morning show. I will not even try to pronounce the name of that show, I'm sorry, but it's Emilia Uljas, colleague over here in the middle. Then we have the member of the Copenhagen City Council, a representative of the Liberal Party and an independent sustainability consultant, Louise Thompson. Right over there on the right side of the panel, thank you. And then we also have an advisor to a member of the parliament and a member of the municipal council for Prienu district, Jovidas Juocevičius.
Hiya.
Right here next to me. All right, so we had a short discussion before this discussion to sort of outline what could be the main two subtopics for this given topic, since it's pretty vague, I think. And the main two subtopics that we would like to tackle today, I guess, is how to get young people more involved or more interested in politics. And the second one would probably be how to get young people to run for office. But I guess it's sort of, the first part is sort of a big part of the second one, I guess. And we sort of, again, in our short discussion that we had before sitting down, we sort of all agree with the premise that younger people should be more involved into politics. We're not looking into statistics, right? That the younger demographic, they don't perform as well or anything like that. We're not looking at statistics. We just have the basic gist is that they need to get more involved, and how do we get them more involved into politics? Is that something that we have like common ground on or no? Or do we have any contrarians or anyone that would like to disagree with this statement? No, not really. Cool. If you have any questions, suggestions, if you're a contrarian, if you think, no, we have to raise the, voting age to 25 or something, and if you don't like the ideas that we're expressing here and you have different ideas, please voice them. I'll run over to you. I'll give you the microphone, and you can just ask us questions, and we can then interact with you as well. So, the first sort of subtopic. The first subtopic that I'd like to tackle, I guess. Is it better now? I guess it's better now. Probably the one was turned on, yeah. So let's agree with the premise that politicians don't focus. First of all, after every election cycle, doesn't matter if it's local, if it's a parliamentary, if it's a presidential election. After every cycle, we usually see these huge headlines, especially here in Lithuania. We see these huge headlines that the younger demographic didn't turn up. Their participation was the lowest in history and all that. So seeing those headlines, right? If you're a politician, then I guess, if there's this theme that young people just don't turn up to the polls, then as a politician, you sort of don't convey your message, you sort of don't cater your message towards them, because they won't turn up, right? I think we can agree with this premise, right? So politicians don't focus on younger voters since they don't turn up to the polls. So there's very little outreach to young people, I would say. That's just my opinion. But for instance, Louise, you work, again, in the city council for Denmark, right? Do you work specifically on any, let's say, social programs or activities or anything specially catered to the young audience to get them more involved in politics, and what do you do specifically?
First of all, I don't think I agree with what you said, that the politicians don't focus on the young voters. I think especially in the municipality of Denmark, in the city council, the young people that ran for office, we focused a lot on the young voters, because if they don't vote, then there's a lot of potential to get a lot of votes. So I don't agree totally with what you said. So we focused a lot on getting young people to vote. And some of the things we did was cooperating with the Copenhagen University to try for them to also get the message out, to get people to vote. And also in the City Council of Copenhagen, we also have like a youth council. So like people aged 12 to 20, they vote to have their own council, and they get to have their say in what we discuss in the City Council. So that's also a way to kind of try to encourage young people to participate.
Sorry, I see. I'm actually glad that you disagree with my premise, because it was sort of just a hypothetical of, if we assume that young people don't turn up, then sure, it's a demographic that we don't, as past politicians, don't need to reach, right? Because if you don't turn up, I'm not gonna cater my message towards you. Emilia, how do you consciously or maybe unconsciously convey political messaging that would be more attractive to young people? Because you have like a big platform, right? You have like a very popular show. You're a political commentator. And is there some, again, conscious or maybe unconscious effort to formulate your message that it would be more appealing to a younger audience? Is there an active, are you actively trying to do so?
I'm not sure if I'm actively trying to do so, but what I did get many, like after I were in the show for a few times, I did get a lot of comments being like, oh, it's so nice that you talk to like us young people and you use the language that young people use and not try to sound too clever or too difficult. And well, after I got those comments, I think I did actually start doing it a bit more actively, because I believe that when I'm 22, and when I'm 22 and I'm in this like adult TV show, then I do also have this sort of responsibility to speak in a way that makes young people also maybe more interested in politics.
That's also very glad to hear, because there's a sort of a, let's say, trend or a theme. I think Jordan Peterson probably brought it up on social media to just maybe sound very smart. So I'm happy that you're not taking that route or that path of communicating your message. As the member, let's say, you, Jovide, are the advisor to a member of a parliament, right? Yeah. Is said member, let's not name him or her, does said member have like a certain part of the, let's call it, well, I mean, this word is pretty heavy, but let's say part of his or her agenda, is it catered somehow to appeal to a younger audience, or is it something that's not actively addressed?
Well, what he does have is a couple of young advisors to him, and we always try to push him to...
Such as yourself?
Yeah. So, and regarding the agenda, there's actually one thing that's currently is under the process, and that is we filled the form to the parliament's how you say to the research department. So we want to find out what the risk would be if we would allow people from 16 years of age to drive the cars like they do in the US. So it's one of the things that actually appeals to the younger generation, younger part of our society. And the other things, yeah, so we do engage with the youth. Actually, my member of the parliament, he once was the chairman of the Young Conservatives League of Lithuania, so, and he still engages in that part, and we do not forget, and we do actually care about the youth.
I see. During the, again, I'm referencing a call we had before this meeting. During that call, I just don't recall which one of you said, was it Emilia or Luis? I think it was Luis, mentioned that we need to bring politics to where young people are. Can you please elaborate a bit on that and how your daily job, let's say, how your daily job adds to this certain message?
Yeah, I think when I said that, it was especially like during elections and getting people to get interested in local politics and get people to like know why it's so important that they vote, why there are so many decisions that are taken at the local level which affects their daily lives. And that's what, as I mentioned before, we had a cooperation with the Copenhagen University that we went out on the schools and we get into the school and hand out our flyers and have like tables set up where people can just come and talk to us. But at other universities, for example, the Copenhagen Business School and also a lot of high school, they were really afraid to let us in because they were afraid to get too political. And I think that is a shame, because I think that you have to like invite the people in to actually talk to the young people, because you cannot expect that the young people will go to where the politicians are. So I think that it's important that the schools are actually really open to get politicians to come to the school to talk to the people, and they don't have to be so afraid that they would get too political, as long as they just invite people from both right wing and left wing and the middle.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is sort of one of the bullet points that I've also written down was was adding, maybe, I don't know, somehow adding adding politics. Well, this is going to sound pretty vague, but adding politics to the school curriculum. So politics in itself, that's very polarizing, that's very controversial, right? So if we were to have a certain degree of, I don't know, political influence in schools without any negative connotations, what do you think, Emilia? What could that be?
I think it's definitely a good idea to bring more politics into schools, and by saying that I mean more like party politics, not in the curriculum, you know, as in whoever's in the government decides what's being taught, of course not, but I mean exactly maybe the way that Louise just told about her parties going to universities and like telling the young people what they do and what they think about these political matters. I think that especially party politics can be very unappealing to young people. Mostly when you say something about party politics, the first thought that comes to mind is that there's just polarizing and everyone's just yelling at each other and no one's doing anything important, when in reality it's not as much yelling as it maybe seems to outside. So I think it's important to bring more party politics close to young people.
Okay, Louise, please add to that.
Yeah, just the same point, because my experience is also that when we actually go to the schools, to the high schools, get to talk to people, they are like, okay, you are actually also just normal people. I mean, we are not so like, we're actually really good friends, we are not yelling at each other, and we get the possibility to go to the schools. We can show them that we're actually just normal, nice people, and they don't have to be like, oh, every politician is just bad, we don't want to vote. So I think that's really, really important. And also in Denmark, we have a new thing at the public school where we have like a school election. So we have like 1 week every second year where all the youth parties of the political parties go to the schools, and then they have like political debates, and then at the end of the week all the people in the 7th, 8th and 9th grade, they actually get to vote. And then we have like national elections that's in television, so people kind of try to vote before they're able to vote in the real election, and I think that has been really, really good.
I also think that here in Lithuania, I'm just assuming, this is just off the top of my head, if we had some sort of a political curriculum, I don't know, in our schools, our parents would just go and protest because they'd say this is indoctrination or something like that. But you had something to say about this.
Like, I think regarding the teaching politics in schools, it does not have to be focused on the political parties or on the ideologies. As I was in school, we had like it's called civic lessons, where they just give you terms, you have to memorize them, and then comes the test, you have to answer correctly, like how does the parliament work, how does the government work, etc., etc. But as I went to university and I started to study political sciences, one of the first things that they try to explain to us, because back in school, if somebody mentions me politics, I would imagine dudes with suits, you know, with the serious faces and just a lot of speeches. But what they taught us in the university is that how politics actually affects my life. Like, how is it not just some posh, fancy place to work in, but actually it's an idea. it's an opportunity for me to build my own livelihood. So, because all the decisions that are made in the legislation, in the local councils, they affect our environment, they affect basically how we live. So I think it's very important that people would start to understand that as soon as possible, and that should be taught in schools, that politics is not some idea for money laundering and stuff like that, some shady stuff. It's about the civic responsibility, and politics is the things that we should be all proactive, because through politics we create our living environment. So I would say that.
Politics, not politics, but the parliament is the hive for corruption, right? That's how that's how sort of we understand it. It's an anecdotal, let's say. So you've already touched upon certain legislation to lower the age of entry for voting, right? So lowering the age for voters. Can you please elaborate more on that, or what are your opinions? Let's go maybe clockwise. I don't know. What are your opinions on that? And aren't there too many risks to get, let's say, well, not unqualified politicians, because politicians have to enroll themselves, but 16-year-olds, if we let them vote for parliament, they're sort of uninformed, right? We can sort of get people in our government that don't have the competence to deal with legislation or with anything related to the government. So what are the risks and what are the pros and cons maybe of lowering the age of voters? What do you think? Let's start with Emilia, I guess.
This is a question that I've been thinking a lot, because there's quite a lot of movement in the youth political sphere in Finland discussing whether we should lower the age of voting. I'm actually not sure, because on the other hand, of course, it would be good that the people would get the sort of going to voting, it would become a thing, natural thing for them to do.
Yeah, they can start to develop a habit earlier.
Develop a habit early. Yeah, and also the 16-year-olds are still in school, so maybe schools could encourage them to go vote and all that sort of thing. But then on the other hand, we also have these youth elections in Finland. We call them shadow elections, and in those elections, there's always one number that gets the most amount of votes, and it's always 69. So everyone here can probably figure out what that means, which is a sign of maybe some immaturity. So I'm not sure about the question whether we should make the voting age lower.
Yeah, I'm against lowering the voting age. It's 18 in Denmark. I think it's here too, and I think that is the right age. I think it makes sense that you go to vote when you're also able to have your own bank account, to buy your own house, to drive a car, when you are grown up, when you are an adult. And I think if you say that 16s should vote, then you kind of also say to them that they should take more responsibility in a way in their own life, but they're also still children, and I think it's okay to be children. But I think there's a lot of other things you can do. For example, the school elections, where you try to vote at the school, and also, as I said, in a lot of city councils in Denmark, you have a youth council where you also run for election and get voted, and then you can say your opinion on all the matters which are related to the youth. And I think that's a better way to go. And also when then people turn 18, then they are adults, and then they get all the full responsibility, and then they can vote.
You had some notes?
I just wrote down one of the ideas that they teach you. If you want to make the commercial effective, if you want to actually catch the people's eyes, you have to depict the stuff that you try to sell in a way that they would relate to it as much as possible. So, and regarding on this, maybe I'll elaborate on the things that I said earlier. But the thing is, if people can relate, so people actually do care about that. So, and as I mentioned earlier, it should be taught in schools that the politics is the way how we create our living environment. So, and as soon as people would be taught that, as soon as they would start to understand that actually I should care about these things because they affect, like, if my street next to my house is gonna be like of the gravel or the asphalt, for example, if we get enough of the signatures. So, for example, people, if they understand how important the politics is, not things about the dudes in suits, but things of politics as a way to create your own home, your own living environment, and if they can relate to that, if they can care about that, I think the age is the least important factor. I think you can be 15, you can be 16. If you care actually about the things that shape your environment, you will do some research and you'll try to pick or vote responsible because you don't want to live in a, unfriendly environment, I would say. So
I see. So you've sort of visited the avenue of communication. That's also a sort of a big talking point for us, especially, right? Now, I don't really know the communication climate for Finland or for Denmark, but what are the areas, maybe just like general areas that you look personally to improve, or that were improved during a certain time when you're active in the political sphere? What certain areas were improved in communication, in communicating to younger people that, not that, but about politics, like what politics is, that the voting is a responsibility, that just generally making it more appealing to the young person. Talking about communication, we spoke a bit about TikTok communication, memes, all that. Do you have something to add? Like, what are the specific, let's say, outcomes that you've noticed?
That relates back to like being where the young people are, and the young people are on the social media, and therefore it's also important that the politicians are also at the social media. And I think a lot of time it's like criticize how much politicians are at social media, but at the other hand it's also important that they are where the young people are. But we have like especially one politician in Denmark which has been really, really good at activating young people, especially on TikTok. And I mean, some people think that what he is doing is not like real politics, but on the other hand, you can really see that the amount of young people who are voting for him, they're not just voting for him because they think he's funny, they're actually voting for him because he have made them realize that they are actually liberals, that it's actually important for them to decide over their own life and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to use social media, and it's something that has been definitely increasing in Denmark for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I actually have an example from our recent parliamentary elections that were held last spring. There were these two young men in their 20s approximately who really reached the right audience on TikTok. They really blew up on TikTok, and they reached especially those kinds of young people who wouldn't necessarily vote on previous elections, but they saw these TikTok videos that these two guys made, and then they both got these amazing amounts of votes. We're talking like tens of thousands, which is really a lot in Finland, especially when when they were at their first elections, and since they're so young. So I think that's really that really goes to show how if you reach the right audience, it really has a lot of potential.
Okay, so are we then saying that political parties and maybe candidates should just invest more into PR companies or to work on communication? Because here in Lithuania we actually have one example. I don't know if it's a good example, but it's like a pretty young party, and they definitely tried their hand in TikTok communication, and I'll just say it was pretty cringe. So those, I guess, are the risks of miscommunicating then and just completely misaligning with your audience. So what do you think of that? And again, are we just saying that you need to or you need to pay a good PR company and you'll be in the parliament?
Well, I think a lot of parties have like PR companies. Then you of course need money, and that's the difficult part. But I think like in Denmark, a lot of politicians has tried using social media and TikTok and Instagram videos. But the one person that I talked about, he actually succeeded, and I think what he did right was it was not only funny, it also had like real political messages. And I think what some politicians did wrong was that they were just like trying to be funny. And I think it's nice that that didn't work out because it showed that, okay, it needs some political message. It actually needs to be relevant for the people it's added. So, of course, it's important, but you also need to have some political messages and some real political viewpoints.
Jonas, you were pretty vocal on the topic of some parties having TikTok accounts. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so the example, I think it did actually seem a bit too cringe on that. But I think from the side of the politicians, I think you should not try or maybe experiment in the ways of communication that you are not fit for. And we have a very good example of that. I think you should strive to look for what does actually fit you, and you have to know your audience and what's important to them. And then you just have to send a message that as much as relative to them, so you can attract them to your idea, to your voting. So regarding the communication, when it comes like to the political questions, it's very difficult to debate, because usually if you pick one point of view, you have to put yourself back from the rest, because in any debate that I usually have, there's like always two ways. So sometimes it can be on the one hand, sometimes on the other. So, but regarding the forms of the communication, I think you should choose the one that fits you, and the one that can convey your message in one of the, in the best ways. But if we would step back from the mass communication, what I tried, I actually went to some schools to give them lessons about the politics. It wasn't much of the lesson, more like of the presentation, how does the parliament work, the idea of politics, and etc. And I see actually some people from the school here, so it's very nice.
So and communication worked, I guess?
Yeah, we can see the example. So sometimes you don't have to attract masses. If you do step by step from the smaller groups, I think it can work out a good thing, because I had like a few sessions with them. At first they could not like see the difference between the one party and the other, and after like 2 sessions I would give them like Kahoots and questions, and they would seem like they learned something new, and it was given them in a new way that they, I would say, used to receive the information.
So we are talking about communication. We are talking about TikTok as well. So it's sort of a digital, well, not just a digital age, but like a digital generation. And I've seen a couple of polls where young people were asked, what can be improved in the voting process for you to participate more? And I'm not sure if it was the U.S. or if the poll was conducted in the U.S. or European Union. Either one of those, 70% would say that they would definitely go vote if it was digital. Basically, if there was a possibility of voting on your phone or via your bank or anything like that. So I'm not sure if there exists a platform where voting can be done digitally in Estonia, maybe, or some country had that. But I assume, as far as I know, it's not a very safe platform, and it's sort of a bit of a controversial take on voting, right? What do you like? For instance, what do you think of that? Is that maybe something that can be looked, maybe for local elections, not a presidential election? Like, is there a possibility of somehow gathering younger people to the digital landscape? And then maybe then they would be more active in voting.
Well, maybe they could do like an experiment, like you said, like on local elections or some elections that maybe don't hold as much national importance. But I have to say I'm a bit old-fashioned in this question. I find it a bit difficult to trust electronic.
Same. Yeah. I'm just saying that this was something that probably a group of 14-year-olds offered.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just, let's try to sort of explore this idea.
Yeah, it's definitely worth of exploring, but yeah, it feels difficult to think that if something is on the internet, then it can be hacked. Like if you're good enough, if it can be hacked, and there may be very bad consequences. So I would be very careful.
Louise, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical for that one as well. I think there's no way that you can be like 100% sure that no one is gonna do anything to like harm the election. And what we see from like Russia and other places right now, I just think it would not be worth it trying to get young people to vote more by doing this, and then at the same time not being sure whether it's actually getting hacked or something. So I think that would not be worth it. And I just, when I go to vote, I love it. I think it's like so amazing to like come in and you get your paper and you go in and you do the voting. I just think it's like a really great feeling. And I think it would also be a shame to kind of lose that really like sense of this is like, okay, this is democracy in action. And I think a lot of people that have actually voted have the same feeling, and I think that would also be a shame if you could just do it on the internet in just like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to forming a habit, right, of voting. So then you've just mentioned the voting process. Do any of you maybe share your first voting experience, or if you have anything memorable from a voting process? Because you've mentioned you love the opportunity of having to go and vote, go to the polls, right? Is there anything very specific that you can remember from any of your elections that was so memorable that it helped you develop this habit to go and vote consistently?
I don't know what it is. I think just like when I voted for the first time when I was 19, that was the first election we had after I turned 18. And it was like a big debate in the classroom, okay, who are able to vote, who can actually go vote, who are old enough. And I just think like the special feeling there is in like the voting hall, and there's like, no one is like laughing in the voting hall. I mean, people are serious. This is democracy in action. And I just think it's like a really special feeling that you don't get anywhere else. And I don't know what it is. I just really loved it. And I think it would be a shame to lose all that, where you really feel like you are participating in democracy and you're going in, you are putting your X on the person that you want to represent you. And I just think that is really special.
One memorable thing about voting in the last parliamentary elections in spring, actually, especially if we're talking about how we can get more young people to vote, my university actually did this kind of campaign that if you voted, you could go to the school cafeteria and get like the cinnamon bun for free. So that was an encouragement, definitely.
There you go. Do you have any memories? You have
So. Regarding my first vote, I remember I was very sad because I went to vote. Well, why I went to vote, I think this comes from my family, because we care about politics and civic environment, so I had to go there indefinitely. But the thing is, when you vote for the first time, you usually get the copy of the constitution as a reward. I did not get that, and I was very upset about that. And I was like, okay, maybe next year. But then I went the
So you're now just living a lie that someday you might get the book, and that's why you go to vote, right?
And that day is today, because there's like a parliamentary. Yeah, you see the constitution book. Oh. I won that in the lottery over there, so now I'm fine.
So now you won't vote anymore because there's no point, right?
Well, unless I'll run myself, No. But coming back just quickly to the digital voting, I know that actually it's one of the things that we had on our agenda, my member of the parliament. We tried to push for that, but I'm not sure where it ended up. But there was like an idea, and I dig a bit into that. A few years ago in Lithuania, there was like a pilot test of the digital voting, and fun fact, they actually used the crypto system.
The blockchain.
Yeah. The decentralized, and they would send like the coin to everybody. Then you can vote. I'm not no tech expert. I cannot explain how the stuff works there, but I think there are possibilities. What we need for that is a political will, and of course the that coping with the risk as much as possible.
You see, I told you he's the most liberal guy out of the four of us, and he's with the conservatives. Yeah. Okay, so getting back to, like, let's say very extreme measures for voting, right? What do you think, again, clockwise, counterclockwise, since voting is not only a right but also a responsibility, like, you're not gonna like this, but for instance, I am not against the idea that there should just be fines if you don't go and vote, unless you're, I don't know, unless you have your back broken, your both legs broken, you have a coma or something. Like, if you don't go vote, just get a 50 € fine or something. What do you think of that? Because I would probably be one to, if I was the Putin of Lithuania, I would. Okay, now that sounded really bad. So if there, if I had a magic wand, I would definitely implement this law. Sorry guys. So what do you think of, like, extreme measures to sort of make people go vote?
I am very, very, very much against that. I mean, I think that would be really awful, actually. Because I think, like, voting is, of course, it's a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity. And I mean, I also like the fact that people actually just give one thought about who they're actually voting for. I mean, I think you could also end up in some where the politicians actually end up taking some extreme measures to get the people who just vote because they don't want to get the fine. Then then you vote for the funny one or something like that. So I like that you actually, if you vote, you have probably thought one thought about, okay, who represents me, which party do I like, and you can also, of course, you can vote blank if you don't want to vote for anyone, but totally against any fines. I think voting is an opportunity.
Oh, and you can vote, like, sort of, if you don't feel like your ideas are represented, you can just vote blank anything. Oh, okay.
I'm not completely against it, but I am a bit against it, I have to say.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, especially like if you have to do something, that's not the best motivator. Like, we all know that. Also, I think, well, is it better that there's like 70% who vote who actually like pay some attention to who they vote, or if there's also the rest of the population who vote because they don't want to get fined, and then they go to the voting booth and be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, which one of these should I take? Like, which one's the better option? I don't know, but that's something for all of us to think about.
Yevday, how do you think our society would take this new legislation into mind?
Yeah, as you mentioned that we should take extreme measures to get people to voting. And I started to imagine myself, if we would employ the military of Lithuania and we would record that, I think we would have a lot of content for the memes, Like they have in Russia, where they film how the military or the police goes to get people to go to the military.
Where they find a dude hiding in a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Okay.
In our case, we would be getting people out of the refrigerators just to vote. So, and some thinking.
Okay, then maybe we can build an incentive system. No, like we can give out cinnamon buns to everyone. Like,
yeah.
I'm not a big fan of that either, actually. We have that at my university, at the Copenhagen Business School, because we want people to vote for the school election there, and then you get like a free cup of coffee. I think that's okay, but also
there
like
you go.
You have a voter turnout of 10% or something. I mean, people don't care about it. But I just think like when you vote for like city council, the national parliament, you should vote because you feel like there's someone who is representing what you think. Or at least like just on one matter. I mean, you don't have to know everything about them, but I think you have to pay some kind of thought to who you're voting for. And I mean, voting is really like a privilege. I mean, a lot of people are dying to get democracies. So I just feel like voting should be enough by itself, and I don't think there should be any fines, and I don't think there should be any gifts either.
Emily, sure. Here they go.
Just finishing. I think we have a couple of examples where punishing people does not actually always work, because they try to protest. In this case, we can fine people, but on the other hand, they can go and just vote for Chuck Norris for president, and what does that give us? I think it's nothing. So in my case, if we look from the right school of thought, where you do not blame the environment, you blame the individual, I think it's very important that the people themselves would be more aware and more motivated to go to vote. So education and building public awareness, I think the two things that we should focus on if we want more people to get to vote.
Also, before this discussion, Emilia and Luisa had sort of a good thought that young politicians, we need more young politicians in politics, right? In power, let's say, so that the young voter would feel more represented. Let's say, what's the situation in Finland or in Denmark in regards to younger people in politics, and what are the growing pains for younger people to participate in politics, but not just participate in politics, not just vote, but actually to run for office, right? So are there any, what are the growing pains and what are the main challenges? Because we also, before the discussion, we had a call where we were talking about the very, let's say, difficult hierarchy or structure of political structure where younger people just don't have a way in. So what do you think of that? Elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's especially something I raised. There's recently been made a study in Denmark which shows half of all young people that vote, it's really important for them to vote for a young candidate. So of course, if there's not any young candidates to vote for, some of them probably won't vote. So that's why I think having young candidates is really, really important. And therefore, of course, when you talk about involving young people in politics, it's important to talk about getting the right, education at the schools and stuff like that. But it's also important to getting young people to actually go into the political parties, because that is the ones who actually ends up being elected and who can actually represent the youth. So, and that's where I also think the youth departments of the political parties are really, really important. And for example, in Copenhagen, we had the elections for the city council last year, and I think we have the youngest city council ever. I think out of 55, we were 15 people elected under 30. And that's because there was a lot of focus on having a lot of young candidates. We had our panel discussions at all the high schools, all the universities, with only young panelists. And therefore, I think it's really important that the political parties prioritize getting young people to stand on the election, to get on the list, and also to prioritize them on the list, so they're not number 20 on the list, but they're actually also on the top. And I think that's really important when you also talk about getting youth to vote. They also need to have someone to vote for.
I have many friends who have been running for parliament or city council or wherever, and one very concrete problem that they face is money. They don't have enough funds
to run a campaign, right?
Yeah, to run a campaign, compared to their older counterparts who then have more money. They can get more commercials of themselves. They're all around. They can get more visibility. So I'd say that's a very concrete problem, but also a problem that would be quite easy to solve, if parties were to give young people more money.
Are there any growing pains here in Lithuania in our current political structure for younger people to participate? Now, as Luisa mentioned, we also have sort of subdivisions for young party has a subdivision for young people, young participants. What are the incentives to be there other than it's a way into the politics? And what do you think of the let's say issue of younger people enrolling and running for office, enrolling into politics?
Well, in my case, I just had this not just running yourself, but running the whole political campaign for the local office. And I can say it's challenging, it's awful, but it's interesting and it's fun. You have to be cold-blooded because there's a lot of negative messages directly against you. And actually it was kind of sad for me, because usually during the local debates, you would hear the notion that we need young people, we need young thought, we need young specialists. But in my case, I consider myself young still, and I ran for the office, but obviously I was not like the comfortable young person for my opponents on the political field, and there was like a lot of political messaging against me that he's too young, he does not know anything, he's like, how can he do this, he barely just graduated and stuff like
Just
that.
say that your opponent's too old.
Yeah, so that's something I tried to say as well, but regarding the youth vote in our parliament, well, at least in our conservative fraction, the conservative, yeah. I think the voice with the situation of the youth voice is not so bad because we have a number of young politics. Well, up to 40 something. There's plenty of young politics, and if you would look at the backstage of the politics, where on the advisors level, it's mostly young people, 25, 27, up to 30. There's like a lot of youngsters working there and forming the policy. So I think there are places where we have to work on, but the situation in general is not as awful. And then on the other side, I think the youth is a very diverse. Like from my experience, I know the people who got into politics because there's a young candidate running. Also, I know some young people who align with themselves with the former communist Lithuanian president who is dead at the moment, you know. So I think it's a very diverse and a very wide spectrum, but yeah, I think it's
Luis,
not
you
so
had
bad.
something to add?
That was the thing about money again. That's definitely one of the big issues. Being a young candidate, you don't have a lot of money. And that's also why I talked before that the youth departments of the political parties can be really important, because I was elected as the youth party candidate, so they actually helped sponsor my campaign. And that's why it's also important that the mother parties actually prioritize giving money to the youth parties, because money is really important, and it's really difficult to run as a young candidate if you don't have any money. So definitely the mother party, it's not enough just to say to young people, hey, you should vote. They should also make sure that there's the right infrastructure. They should make sure that they prioritize their youth department, that the youth department actually get money so they can actually run a campaign. That's really important, I think.
So, okay, we touched upon money. We have sort of this running narrative that's sort of popular amongst older people, I guess, but it got to me as well. Well, I'm 31, I'm old. So this narrative that, you know, young people or like very smart young people don't usually go into the political field or here in Lithuania, or don't go into politics, don't go into parliament because of low salaries. And when we had, but again, this could just be a misconception or a misunderstanding, because it's just a narrative, I think. Because I mean, the parliament member salaries are public. I can just Google them and find them, right? And I can just compare them with other areas, other professional areas. But it was just funny that when we had that call before the discussion, and I'm like, do you have representatives from Finland and Denmark? I'm like, do you have any problems with salaries in the parliament? And they both were like, yeah, no, the salaries are very good in the parliaments. So you don't have any issues with the fact that, let's say, if you have a young person, right? If you have a very active, smart young person, and he's thinking whether I should go into politics or whether I should go into, you guessed it, IT. So there's sort of like, what's the situation in Finland or in Denmark? Is there are the salaries comparable at all, or is it or is the gap huge? Do you understand the question? Like, sort of, if there are certain areas for a smart young person, like, is there any, talking specifically about salary, what's the incentive for him or her to enroll into politics?
I honestly don't think that that's a problem in Finland. I just don't. There are many people in the parliament who have previously been working on IT or business or like this very these fields that pay you a lot of money, and now they're members of parliament and apparently happy there. So I don't see that as a problem.
Well, it's nice to be here in another country because then I can actually raise this issue because normally it's not like a really good seller to say you want to have more money. So that's nice because I think the Danish parliament, they have fine salaries. There's no problem with that. But if you look at the city councils, it's actually a debate that is going on right now, especially in the big cities. And I'm a member of the Copenhagen, the city council, so that's the biggest city in Denmark. It's actually a debate because you are paid for it to be like a half-time job, but it's full-time. I mean, it's more than full-time. So of course, I go to Copenhagen Business School, and if I looked at salaries, I should definitely not choose the city council to work at. And I think it's a shame that, I mean, not just that you're not getting a high wage, but also that the wage is like actually for a part-time job, but the work is for a full-time job. So we are having this debate also not because people like in total want more money, because they want a higher wage at the city council so they can work less on the side. So they actually have time to do the job that they need to do. And also in Denmark right now, we talk a lot about stress among politicians. That's a really big issue. Our deputy prime minister, the leader of our party, has just been on a sick leave because he had stress. So I think a lot of young people also in the city council right now are also wondering, okay, is this actually something I should do? Because the work is way more than full-time and I don't have enough hours at all to do the work I feel like I should do to be able to do the job that people have elected me for. So I think it's like a discussion of both salaries, which also relate to like how much stress you have on working two full-time jobs at the same time.
Would you like to elaborate on our salaries, since you're getting one, I guess?
Yeah. So in Lithuania,
I'm not asking you for a specific number. Don't worry about it.
Those are public, you know. You can just Google.
Again, they're public, yeah.
So the thing is that the current salary for the member of the parliament in Lithuania is on the level like of the middle manager. So it's not as high as I think with our neighbors on the other side of the Baltic Sea.
But probably not as low as this narrative would get us to believe, right?
Yeah, and now they actually rose the salaries. So from the next term, the politicians that will get elected to the parliament will earn more than they currently do now, and they rose the salaries for the local mayors and all the public sector in general. So that's a good thing, and I think there are two hands.
Well, you'd say that.
Yeah, of course. Well, on one hand, if you pay the politician a bigger salary, there's a lower chance that he would get corrupt. But on the other hand, if the guy thinks only about money, he'll get corrupt anyway. So I think it's the importance on the point of view of the individual, that if you only care about the money, about the luxury and stuff, you'll just go that way. Either way. But if you go with the idea that you want to work for the public and not for the money, then I think you'll get paid as much as you get paid. You'll be happy living with that, and you'll feel good because you served your country, your state, your neighbors, your friends, and your public and your community.
What a beautiful closer. I've just noticed that we have 4 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions to any of us at all? Give me a second.
Okay, hi. So a quick question with some follow-up questions, but it's not big. So you, in the beginning of the discussion, you touched upon the political education through school curriculum as well as the communication and apps. So my question is how to ensure that such education, political education, would be high quality and unbiased, most importantly. Because I think as young people, most importantly, they must have they must form their own opinion, but at the same time, young people are easily influenced by their environment and by the trends and by these other factors. So that would be my question. Thanks.
That's a very good question. Thank you. I think one good way to do this is by bringing people from each of these parties to schools in a way that there's all of the parties, all of the like major parties represented. So then they can all have their own like case, and then they. I believe it kind of balances out, and then the students can think for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's also a really important thing, because at least in Denmark there's like a saying that all of the teachers are left-wing. I don't know if it's true, but that's something people say. So I think, of course, when people take the educations to become teachers, of course that's something that's important. And then I think we also need to trust our teachers so they can teach about the political system without being biased. And of course that's a really big focus point. But I also think some of the best things you can actually do is like bring people out from the parties, from both sides of the parties, because then you are sure that both sides are represented. And also like something I think is easier to hear from someone who says, I am a liberal, because then you know they're not hiding anything. Where if you hear from someone who says, oh, I don't have any opinions, but they say things and you're like, okay, that kind of sounds like an opinion. I like that people are just like, this is my opinions, this is how I think. And then you just need to make sure that you have people who have different opinions.
I think it's very much possible to teach unbiased politics. So in that case, because politics is not only about being member of the party or some guy or the parties, there's whole idea, there are many dynamics, how the strategies work, how the parliament works. I think it could be taught about the idea why politics is important and how does it relate to me, as I mentioned earlier. And I think there could be the pupils could be taught about the values of different spectra of the ideological scale. So I think that's possible, but for that to be implemented, I think it could be like on a parliamentary level, made a working group, involved all of the political parties. So I think that would ensure that the program or the stuff that they would teach you would not be only biased to one or the other side. And I think it's possible. And there's plenty of other things about politics, regardless of the political parties.
Room for one more question. Please do, sir.
Oh, no. No, just gonna be question for one of the Finland and Denmark representatives. So, what kind of radical movements, radical parties, and radical politics do you have in your countries, and how youth react to them, and do radical movements match in your countries with youth? The youth and the radical politics match in your country? So think.
This is kind of a hot topic in Finland at the moment, because there's this one populist right-wing party that's in the government coalition right now. They have been on the coalition for approximately 2 months. They have already had to change one minister because he had attended these Nazi events, and there are numerous scandals about other ministers in the party about Nazis and racism and hitting on underage girls and that sort of stuff. But it's a bit like in Finland, you can't really say that they're radical. It's not really like a thing you can say in the political atmosphere. But like here in Lithuania, in a safe environment, I can say that I do think that they are the sort of radical movement that you maybe mean here by this question. Yeah, I think that's probably that's the most major one, and they do like, for example, the 2 members of parliament, two guys in their 20s who I mentioned earlier, who reached their audience through TikTok. They were both at this party, and I have to say they do reach young people. Yeah.
Well, in Denmark we have 2 really right-wing parties. And luckily, it doesn't seem like the young people are really supportive of them. It's mostly middle-aged men that likes those parties for some reason. So and I don't think they're not really good on social media, TikTok either. So luckily, I don't think the youth have like gotten into like the really radical parties.
I think that is our time. I want to dedicate a huge thanks to my participants and everyone who came here and tuned in to see the discussion. Thank you very much, and I'll see you somewhere else over here.